Hi, welcome back to class, and we are on week 13, so we're on we're moving along through the class pretty quick. Um, this is the last section before we start getting into the section on social change, and so this is going to be an area we're going to let you quit at for ideas for making for your paper. So this week what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the chapter. There's going to be no extra Dropbox, but we're going to start a Dropbox on the we're going to start a Dropbox on the final section for your paper. And I was just noticing that my notes didn't totally upload in the computer, so we're gonna fix that. But what we're gonna do is this week we're gonna focus on the health and medicine section, and then we're going to have a little bit of supplemental material that gets into the concept of environmental racism. And so as we do that, you will be able to apply a lot of information together. And so at this point, I'm going to actually get a little stricter with the assignment for the discussion. So I'm going to require 250 words minimum. I want you to not really fluff around the edges on this anymore. So some people are putting some pretty deep initial posts, but there are other people who are, taking I guess, a more efficient way of answering these. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit more depth in the initial post and tie this information back on each other. So this week we have a crash course video. And there is also an article you'll read on environmental racism. And then there is a video on environmental racism that you're also going to watch. In that video, they're going to discuss some of the problems that are shown in the South. And then there's going to be a discussion thread. And what we'll do is I'll work through here and show what we have going on. So as we go through here, you're going to notice we have the crash course in sociology video. So I know I did these in the beginning of the semester. I backed off a little bit on them as we went through on some other topics. But this is another topic I think you should have a little more background with, because people don't generally think of medicine as being something that we discuss in sociology. But I'm hoping this week I'll change that view. There's a video. So there's a video on that you're going to watch. There's no assignment tied to it, but I do want you to watch it. It will give you some more background information and tie this subject into medicine. And then there's an article we're going to read here, and this is looking at how environmental racism has affected, some segments of the population more than others. And this is a recent article, so we're looking at something from just a couple months ago. And there's a video on here, which I also do have a link to in the discussion. I want you to watch the video and use this article together to answer the questions for the first question for the Dropbox. For the discussion thread, I'm sorry. And so as we go to the discussion thread, you're going to use that article and the video to post your initial post. So this post needs to be at least 250 words. That's not very much. That's about half a page of writing. So a few paragraphs. But I want you to use the article as a reference for this. Environmental racism is something that is very important that we understand. And it's something that gets discussed quite a bit in sociology, even though we don't normally think of it. And a couple years ago, if you could remember, Dakota Access Pipeline, that's a good example of how the discussion of this region gets brought up in environmental racism. So what you had with that was you had a pipeline going through an area, so it was going to go right along the northern border of a reservation, and the people there objected, just like the people in other towns upriver objected to the pipeline. And the big argument with environmental racism is, keep things that are bad out of our neighborhood. So people don't usually want a pipeline going through their water source. They don't want a power plant being built, where their kids play. They want fresh air and clean water. It's just a common thing that people want for their environment, their communities. And so, our region, when we discuss this in sociology, other classrooms show videos of the Dakota Access Pipeline in this discussion. In this class, we're going to look at the South for this particular discussion. And what we're going to do is, after we use this article to discuss this, there's a TED Talk I want you to watch. This is one of my favorite TED Talks, and I've actually probably shown it in numerous classes because there's a lot of times that this particular talk comes up. So it ties in the idea of dealing with a social problem like environmental racism. It ties that in with trying to find a solution. And a major part of sociology that gets discussed, if you look at Mills, is what's the point of talking about these problems if we're not going to discuss solutions? And so many sociologists push for a lot more than just discussing what a problem is. So it's not a class and just complaining. It's a class and looking at an issue and then proposing solutions. And so we're going to look at an activist who's discussing dealing with environmental racism in the South Bronx. And so the neighborhood that she's from is actually a few miles from where my parents live and my grandparents, my grandmother. So my parents live in the Bronx, and so she discusses an area down in the South Bronx where they actually have a lot of things that people do not want in a neighborhood. But she discusses how to move forward and how to make your area better and how to deal with this. And so I think it's a very positive way to bring this discussion around. Ms. Carter actually has some very interesting solutions she talks about. So I want you to discuss how she deals with environmental racism in her TED Talk. And her TED Talk isn't on environmental racism. She has a nonprofit actually that's just dealing with fixing the area, but it ties perfectly into this conversation. So I want to take this discussion, which is very negative, and turn it into a positive talk. So you're going to have another 250 words you're going to type about how she discusses dealing with this issue. And again, I think it's nice to have a class that we don't just talk about the bad things. We try to talk about some optimism, because it's a lot easier to talk about fun stuff. So we're gonna talk about that. And then we have another Dropbox. So you're gonna just use this to do the final section of the foundation of your paper. So your last section will be looking at chapters 9 through 13. And again, the whole point of this is you're going to have these 3 sections that you laid out. So that's going to be about 4.5 pages worth of writing. You will have to edit this together and stitch it together, but I think it shouldn't be hard to take this and put it together and then build a sociological biography. So you're going to take this information and try to tie it back to yourself. And use this class to get a better understanding of who you are. So this last section is just to use these final chapters to do that. And then I will give directions next week on how to bring these together. You do have 2 weeks to finish this, so these can overlap. I do urge you to try to move ahead a little faster if you can and get it done this week, just because I know you have other classes, and some of them can be quite difficult to get everything done on time. And so I don't want this class to be really tough for you. And you'll appreciate it at the end. So here again, I do have the Dropbox updated, so the assignment sheet's updated, so it does reflect the chapters 9 through 13. If you have any questions, again, get back to me. I really do enjoy the discussions you're having. There's not only good discussions, but there's some coaching going on, so some people see things that they think people should do differently, and they're telling each other. I really appreciate that. In a class, that's the kind of thing that happens in a classroom setting, and I love seeing a sense of community build up, here too. So, like I said at the beginning, this is online, but I do hope you guys develop a sense of community, and you can help each other, do well and learn a lot in this class, and hopefully have a good time. So again, if you have any questions, send me an email, and I'll get back to you. And otherwise, have a great week. Thank you.